My name is Josh Doying, and I am a startup success manager at UMD's UM Ventures. I just wanted to welcome everybody who's made time to join this session of our Startup Fundamentals Workshop series. We record all of these workshops, and they are available and posted on our YouTube channel afterwards. We've got workshops on a variety of topics that match different stages of the startup journey for innovations coming out of universities. And so please feel free to check out that channel and view past view past workshops. If you have questions today, please feel free to throw those into the chat. I'll also make time at the end to do a little Q&A. But we'll be discussing some of the different sources of funding available to University of Maryland startups. Some of these are strictly for University of Maryland startups. Some of these are available more broadly, but are also excellent sources of funding for startups coming out of UMD. Some of them have different target audiences and members that they're open and available to. And so I will let folks know as we go along what the funding, what the differences between each of these funding sources is and who it might be available to you as you try and figure out what makes the most sense for your own startup and your own journey. So like I said, I put up earlier these six kind of sources of our audience. These are the four that we'll generally be talking about today. And I'll again try and highlight if you are part of an alumni group or faculty or a student, like which one you should apply for. But before I get too deep into my presentation, I do want to share that innovate.umd.edu is a great site and resource where you can log in and view all the resources that are available, and many of the resources that I'm going to share today, as well as resources that I'm not going to talk about today based on who you are and what exactly you're looking for. And so encourage you to go check that out. But first, before we even get into the specific sources of funding, I do want to do just a quick definition and explanation of the different types of funding. There are two main categories of funding. There's non-dilutive funding, which is funding that does not take an equity position in a company or an innovation. And then there's dilutive funding, which is funding that takes an equity position. Basically, you dilute the share of the ownership that you hold in exchange for the funding that you receive. And so some types of funding sources, there's self-funding. That's basically you putting your money into your idea. You've invented something cool, you want to build a prototype, you market that around and figure out how much it's going to cost, and then you go to your bank account and withdraw that money and pay that money. This is a non-dilutive source of funding, right? The ownership remains with you because you are putting the money in. There's no strings attached. It is looked on, it's a plus to your business in regards to future sources of funding, because it proves that you have skin in the game, like you believe in this idea enough and you've done the research enough to be willing to put a little bit of your risk and your equity behind it. But it's also one of the most dangerous types of funding. Dangerous is the wrong word, risky. And so we really encourage you not to risk your own or your family's financial security. Realize, all the different people that rely on the funding that you might be putting into a business, and make sure that you have the support of all those individuals before putting your own skin in the game. But it's often required, especially at the early stage of pursuing an idea, even in really small amounts, and even in small amounts provides that kind of commitment and skin in the game that future investors are looking for. The next type of non-dilutive funding are grants. These do not need to be repaid. There's no equity position taken. The trade-off there is that there's often some sort of requirements to receive these grants, and these may conflict with your commercialization plan or what you're hoping to do. Hopefully they are aligned. Sometimes they, provide extra work. The other kind of trade-off there is that the application process for these grants is often time consuming and competitive. And so even though you put all this time into receiving the funding, there's no guarantee that it'll come through for you. But again, the non-dilutive aspect of it is really appealing. It's money in exchange for completing a set of requirements, but you give up no equity or share of the idea that you're working on. And these are really, really excellent early stage financing mechanisms. Some of the examples that we'll talk about today are I-Corps, MII, and SBIR and STTR. And I'll jump in when we kind of talk about each of those and explain why they work at the part of the startup journey that they work at. Now we're moving from, well, I guess this is still non-dilutive. So the next type of funding is debt financing. This is taking out a loan. But generally, it's pretty hard for a startup to obtain bank loans. Again, there's no equity exchanged, but they must be repaid. And they often require collateral or personal guarantees. And so they have the same kind of level of risk as your own funding, except the same level of risk as self-funding, except they're often really hard to get. The SBA does facilitate loans for small businesses, and so highly recommend going to the Small Business Association. That's a government organization that is designed to support small businesses and help kind of facilitate this process. And now we move into dilutive funding types. And so these are all called equity financing. And there's a variety of different types of equity financing. But again, the basic idea is that you are given money in exchange for a share or equity in your idea. Equity financing can come from friends and family. Equity financing can come from angels. And so an angel is generally a cashed out entrepreneur or some other wealthy individual or group of individuals who are investing their own personal dollars. And so if you've ever seen the TV show Shark Tank, that would be equity financing, right? You've got like the four sharks who are like, oh, I'll give you, $500,000 for 20,000 stake in your company. It's an individual who has their own money, is looking for some sort of return, and is willing to give you money in exchange for equity in your business. Compare that to venture capitalists or VCs. They represent a fund of money that have been collected from other funds, other individuals. So they are investing someone else's money, not their own money. And again, but in exchange for some sort of equity. Equity or stock or board seats, like there's a variety of ways that they can kind of get equity in exchange for their money. And so one really important thing to consider with all these types of dilutive funding is that you're getting the money, and that's obviously really important, right? Like potentially one of the most important things. But actually, what's really valuable in these situations is since you're giving up equity of your company, you're actually bringing someone into joint ownership with your idea and your company. And so it's really worthwhile to try and find a partner who is going to continue to add value. There are situations where, you are like, oh, the money is the most important. I got an angel investor. He's going to give me the money that I want for, a low equity stake, and you just take it. And then that angel investor has 10% of your company. And, if it wasn't a good match, they don't ever do anything for you. They gave you that initial investment, but there's no ongoing help or investment or value. And they just become dead weight as it goes on. The money up front was great, but it doesn't continue to pay dividends. On the flip side, you could seek out angel investors or VCs that have expertise in your specific field. And again, I'm going to refer back to the TV show Shark Tank. Sorry if you haven't seen it, but you'll see the sharks, sometimes say, Mark Cuban is one of them. And he'll say, I've got connections in this industry and I'll be able to help you out. And it makes sense for you to find investors who have those type of connections, because then you are getting the money up front. They're taking equity in the business. They're committed to its success, and they're actually able to help you going forward. And so that exchange of equity isn't always, it's not a bad thing at all, right? You are doing it, you're exchanging it for money at a certain point, but you can also exchange it for expertise and for networks and for continued help, for a partner. There are a variety of benefits that come if you're able to find the right equity investors to get involved with your company. And so we really encourage folks to really vet these processes really hard and not just think about what is the dollars and what is the exchange of the equity. Like there is a third component of who are you bringing in and what value do they add to what you are trying to do. Equity investment also provides a stamp of approval for your company and makes it easier to get future equity investment, makes it easier to get debt financing or loans, right? Like shows that somebody has vetted your company and thought it was worth so valuable that they're willing to give you money for a share that will return money in the future. They believe in your future, and that communicates a lot to other investors. And so this is generally for high growth startups that are positioned to be sold or revenue generating within 5 to 10 years. And so that the investors can start realizing a return on those investments compared to the grants, right? Which happen very early stage when maybe you don't even know the timeline to revenue generating or selling your company. So here are some of the funding sources we'll talk about today, but there's over $1 million in funding available, again, specifically through the University of Maryland. And I'm going to go over each of these, but you can kind of see the monetary values associated with all of them, from 50,000 for NSF I-Corps to 500,000 through the Maryland Momentum Fund, or about 430,000 through TEDCO. And so again, we'll talk about each of these in detail. But one other place I'd recommend you go as you kind of pursue this process is we've designed a startup guide. Let me put that in the chat. It's kind of like a almost monopoly board that takes you through the steps that startups should follow coming out of the University of Maryland. And we've got the 4 main levels: feasibility assessment, startup formation, startup acceleration, and sustainable company. And just logically, right? If you have an idea, you think it's got commercial value, you want to consider turning it into a startup, the first step is, hey, is it feasible, right? Like, you may think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but does the market think so? Do your potential customers think so? What is the cost going to be to manufacture this? And so for each of these 4 steps, we've got a variety of kind of sub steps that you can take. And I've got those slides here, but again, would recommend you go to startupguide.umd.edu. Each of these tiles flips over and talks a little bit about what you need to do at the step, what are the resources available. And as we go through and talk about these funding experiences or funding opportunities, I'll tie it back to these kind of 4 steps in the startup guide. Feasibility assessment, startup formation, startup acceleration, and sustainable company. So the first funding source I want to talk about is the Medical Device Development Fund. Again, this is a very narrow focus on medical devices, but it's $25,000 to $50,000. It's non-dilutive, so it's provided as a grant, and it's a 3 to 9 month project to advance technology up a technology readiness level. And technology readiness levels were designed by actually NASA originally to measure how rapidly or what kind of stage a technology is at. And so this is just designed to move something up a technology readiness level, right? It's very early stage. This comes in even before you truly have like a commercialization plan. And so if you're still doing R&D and it's really just to move it up at TRL, this is a great opportunity to access funds for that. This next one, NSF I-Corps. NSF provides the I-Corps experience for NSF funded research, but also to the broader community, and it provides it out of campuses all across the United States. The University of Maryland is actually a hub for the Mid-Atlantic region, and the purpose of I-Corps is to de-risk a technology. And de-risking means talking to customers and identifying what the market is for a specific technology. And so part of the I-Corps program is the main part of the I-Corps program is just doing customer interviews. And it's a fantastic program that really provides excellent scaffolding on how to conduct an interview, how to talk to the right customer, how to talk to different people at different parts of the supply chain, right? In many of the industries, the people who are using your product aren't necessarily the people who are purchasing your product for a company, right? And so NSF I-Corps has you go out and talk to both of those people and figure out, what does your product need to do and what do you need to communicate in order to sell it, and to be able to take all of that primary research information and bring it back to your product and figure out, what am I actually building here, so that it can be purchased. Because often what you think is the most valuable part of an innovation isn't exactly aligned with what the market thinks is the most valuable part of an innovation. So again, back to who is this open to? NSF I-Corps is open to students, alumni, faculty, anybody who exists within kind of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And the regional program, it's a pretty simple application process. It's a 3-week commitment, and it is attached to 0 funding. However, if you are pursuing an idea that's based on university IP, so a research idea that was developed at a university or has received NSF funding, then you can qualify for national I-Corps, and it just ups the level a little bit. These workshops take place over the summer. They are a little more intensive. The regional program requires you to do 20 customer interviews. The national program requires you to do 100 customer interviews. But in order to cover that, it's attached to $50,000 in non-dilutive funding. And this funding can be applied towards doing that customer discovery research, towards traveling to conferences, to attending the workshop, to having a grad student working on this alongside you. Participating in I-Corps increases the probability of receiving other types of funding like TEDCO MII and SBIR. And it is a 7-week program commitment in order to complete it. You can learn more at icorps.umd.edu, but I just want to like throw my full-throated support behind this. I think I-Corps is one of the most beneficial programs that is provided to individuals looking to de-risk or just to commercialize a technology. And it's often a step that's overlooked because people want to go straight towards the major funding sources, straight towards things that feel, more comfortable, like putting in grant proposals. And sometimes talking to customers makes one step outside of their comfort zone. But it provides such important and relevant data as you pursue this idea. That again, it's a fantastic program and really worth the investment of time, even if you just start with the regional program, which is a 3-week commitment. For students interested in entrepreneurship, there are a variety of on-campus opportunities. The deadlines for many of these have already passed, but if you are interested in watching this year's Pitch Dingman competition, that's run through the Robert H. Smith School of Business. The Do Good Challenge is run through the Public Policy School, and these both are associated with prize funding. These are non-dilutive and provide a lot of good funding there's student tracks, there's alumni tracks, there's all types of tracks. There's idea stage, there's producing revenue, just a great way to get some funding very early on in your startup process. And again, even if you aren't a student, if you're working with a group of students, this is something that they can participate in. All right, TEDCO MII is an opportunity set up by the state of Maryland. TEDCO is not part of the state government, but is funded by the state government. And it provides really important funding for early stage innovations and ideas. And I actually didn't realize how important this was until I was at a conference with technology transfer individuals from all across the country and realized that this isn't standard provided everywhere else, right? People were asking all types of questions about how to get early stage fundings for startups. And I was like, oh, we've got TEDCO MII in Maryland, and realized that like most states don't have this opportunity. And so really encourage you to take advantage of this. There are 2 phases. The first is called a technology validation grant. It's non-dilutive. And so it's a grant. It's money that you get. You have to fulfill the grant objectives, but there's no equity. There's no paying back. That's provided directly to you. This is provided for university-based technology. So the research has to be coming out of a university, generally associated with a faculty member or a grad student. And it's $115,000 awarded to the PI as research funding. You do not have to be a startup or be a company. It can just be an idea or, again, a research idea at this phase. You have 9 months to validate the technology and create a commercialization plan. It covers salaries, equipment, materials, and outside consultants. And it's a very early stage, like I said, before the startup is formed, but is a great first step if you think you've got something that has potential. The next phase of MII is company formation. And so generally you would go through MII phase 1 at the research stage and then continue on to the company formation stage. But you don't have to. You can do each of these independently. You could just jump right into company formation stage. But this company formation is $300,000, and as opposed to being awarded to the PI, it is awarded to the company. So you do have to have founded the company. The company has to be based on university IP. It may be dilutive, which means it's convertible to a debt note, or non-dilutive, which is a reimbursable grant. Reimbursable grant is just another way of saying a loan, but your choice on which one you want to do. And again, you can kind of look at the terms there and see which one makes the most sense for your company. But again, it's very early stage startup financing, often before other investors are willing to put this money down. And so it's a great way to get things off the ground. And yeah, so it's for formed a company, but haven't licensed the technology for more than 1 year and are able to get this, again, very early stage infusion of money. For both of these TEDCO MII programs, we have site miners who work with PIs to get their application down. The site miners have been through this process many times with many researchers. They have specific areas of expertise. They've worked in these industries. And so they can provide you both just overall mentorship and advice on commercializing technologies, but also specific information on how to apply for the program. And they work alongside you in submitting an application. They write a letter of recommendation. When your application goes to be reviewed, they stand in for you and kind of defend the idea to the reviewers. And so if you are interested in applying to the MIA program, reach out to us. My email I put in at the beginning, I'll drop it at the end again, but it's jdoying@umd.edu. I'll put it in the chat right now. And we will have a quick meeting and then connect you with the appropriate SiteMiner to begin working on that process. These TEDCO MII grants have application deadlines 4 times a year each quarter. So January 15th, April 15th, July 15th, and October 15th. And so, usually we ask that you start working on it at least a month in advance. And so there is, some lift for the application, but it's not an inordinate lift. You just have to make sure to reach out, begin working on it, and just start pulling your materials together with enough time to apply. Here's a quick history on University of Maryland College Park's MII application process. You've seen we've grown over the years to, last year we had almost $2.5 million awarded through the MII program, with 18 applications and 12 approved. And so again, it's still an application process, but we do generally have a pretty strong success rate on those applications. You are able to reapply. We get good feedback, and we do see a lot of companies go through on a second application if they aren't able to make it on the first application. But yeah, please reach out if you're interested in MII. The next source of funding I'm going to talk about are SBIRs and STTRs. This is a government funding opportunity, and it's provided by the federal government to promote small business research. And so there are multiple phases with these grants. Again, the idea is that the government wants to export its R&D into small businesses who are doing research aligned with the research interests of various agencies. And so I think there are 11 different agencies that provide SBIRs. I got that on the next slide, so I'll do that real quick and then go back. So I might have to update this slide based on agencies that are still existing. But the Department of Defense has its own SBIR process, and Department of Transportation, NSF. Each of these have their own SBIR process, and so they produce RFPs based on specific research interests that they have. And if your small company has research that is aligned with that interest, you apply for an SBIR, and you can receive up to $150,000 for a phase 1 grant. And again, this actually varies based on what agency is providing the funding, but then up to $1 million for a phase 2 to actually do prototype development. And then phase 3, there's no funding attached, and it's actually not used very much. I'm not going to talk about it today, but it's kind of the phase 1 and the phase 2 are the big parts of the SBIR and STTR process. The other benefit there is that because you are doing R&D aligned with federal agency interests, oftentimes the goal of these federal agencies is to become a customer of your product. And so it's a great way to build those relationships and to have an early stage customer once you've developed a product and have something going out the door. That's not guaranteed, but it is part of the SBIR and STTR process. The drawbacks of an SBIR and STTR is that they are pretty hefty applications. For a phase 1, you want to kind of reserve about 3 months to get one done. For a phase 2, you're looking at more of 4 to 6 months. There are a variety of companies and organizations that help putting together an SBIR application. Each agency has slightly different requirements on what the application should entail. And so it is something where we do recommend you work with somebody to get that submitted. And so if you need fast cash, this isn't the best way for you to go. But as I was talking about earlier, this is a non-dilutive form of financing, and again, does build a relationship with the federal government if you consider them a potential customer. And so it is a good source of funding, although it does take a decent amount of work. And yeah, the last thing is they are really competitive, right? If there's anybody else doing the same thing, they're also applying and there aren't as many awards going out. The next source of funding is the USM Maryland Launch Fund. Grants and investments can range from $1,000 to $50,000, and it's for USM affiliated companies, for-profit or nonprofit. And so students, alumni, faculty, and staff, if you are interested, this is the website that you can, oops, go back to that chat, usm.edu/launch. And they'll notify you about next applications. And so sorry, I'm using an acronym here, USM, University System of Maryland, Maryland Launch Fund. Another source of funding is MIPS, the Maryland Industrial Partnership. What this is, it's a matching program for funding for external companies to do research in a university-based lab. And so if your technology is coming out of the university, once you have established a standalone startup, but you want to continue to have that research out of your lab or out of another lab at the university, you provide $10,000 of funding, and that's matched with $90,000 of funding from the University of Maryland directly to the lab. So there is a little bit of, you have to provide the 10,000 to receive that match, but it is non-dilutive. The project can be 1 or 2 years. It's for research and development or educational training. If you need to train a workforce on how to create or use a product, the research can be applied towards that. And we have, I believe, multiple MIPS rounds every year, but the contact for Ronnie Gist is here on our screen. I can put the website for MIPS in the chat as well. That's mips.umd.edu. The Chesapeake Bay Seed Capital Fund is $100,000 to $500,000 in seed Series A rounds. So this is dilutive. There's an equity taken in exchange for this money. And the criteria is to have a product prototype, can demonstrate product market fit. So harking back to, going through ICORM, being able to demonstrate that there are customers who want this helps you at this stage. A thoughtful commercialization plan, and then demonstrates quantifiable reduction in nitrogen, phosphorus, and/or sediment in the Chesapeake Bay. Originally, this was pretty narrowly focused on contributions to the Chesapeake Bay, but it has broadened quite significantly. If you are pursuing any sort of green tech in energy or anything like that, there's a way to work through kind of making it show, hey, this will benefit the Chesapeake Bay. The funding here is provided through the state of Maryland, and that's why there's kind of these requirements on it. But I do recommend you reach out to Scott Christensen, and he can kind of talk through what requirements you would need to match if you wanted to qualify for this funding. The Discovery Fund, again, it's a dilutive source of funding. It's early stage equity investment. It's provided by PG County, and so the requirements here are that companies must be located in PG County, and so it's trying to grow the PG County innovation ecosystem. They're looking like. Okay, I got a question here about USM launch. I'll circle back to that at the end of the chat. Let me see if I can get you the right website. But again, the Discovery Fund is geared towards high growth technology startups. And again, you can go to our innovate.umd.edu and then look up the Discovery Fund there. For the Maryland Momentum Fund, this is, again, another fund targeted at people who are part of the University System of Maryland. The fund itself is $10 million. It's provided dilutive or equity investments up to $500,000. You have to be connected to USM as a student, alumni, faculty, or a company that is licensing USM IP. And the idea with the Maryland Momentum Fund is that they are coming in to double or 2x external investments. And so you must have a matching investment in order to qualify, which means you are going out and you're getting an angel investor, an equity investor. And if you're able to prove to them that, hey, this idea is worth investing in, the Maryland Momentum Fund will come in and match that investment. The website is momentum.usmd.edu, or the contact Mike Ravenscroft. And again, I will be posting all this information online as well, so you don't have to catch it right now as we go through. At the beginning of the presentation, I talked about angel investors, again, as individuals who are willing to invest in a startup using their own funds. The Dingman Center, which is the Center for Entrepreneurship over at the Robert H. Smith School of Business, does have a group of angels who they cultivate to come to campus, I think about once a month, and hear kind of pitches and presentations. Angel investing is dilutive. It's early stage investment. Companies must be located in the DMV and show proof of early market traction. Again, if you're interested in that, reach out to us and we can connect you with the folks who run those pitch meetings. The piece of advice we give, especially to university-based researchers, is like, this is know your stuff for this one, right? This is have a pitch deck, know how to answer questions about total market size and a little bit of your financials mapped out, right? These are serious investors who have been successful with their money before and who are looking to make continuous investments and have made other investments. And so this isn't, show up and this is my technology and this is how I plan to do it. This is a much more kind of professional pitch presentation. And so again, even though it's a very early stage, it's something that you're doing when you're really serious about the commercialization and startup process and willing to go in that direction. I mentioned TEDCO MII earlier. There are other TEDCO funding opportunities that fit kind of more targeted markets. There's a social impact fund. There's a rural business innovation initiative. But you can learn about all of those at tedcomd.com. And so to close, just share a couple stories to see kind of how this all fits together. Hazel Analytics is actually, I think, one of the best example stories of research coming out of the university using these funding sources to turn into a company. Dr. Ginger Jin, I believe, was actually based out of UCLA, and she was an economist, and she was looking at how to standardize health ratings across different jurisdictions. So, when you go to a restaurant and it says, this restaurant has a 78 grade for health. Some jurisdictions use numbers, some use a 1 to 10 scale, some use a 1 to 100 scale, some use letter grades. This restaurant is a B+ rating. And so she was just interested in how do we normalize across these different jurisdictions, these different grades that they can be compared across different jurisdictions. And she worked with Dr. Ben Betterson, who's a computer science professor here at UMD, to create a database. As their research funding ran out, they wanted to continue doing this. And so they were like, well, maybe we can commercialize this and get funding that way. And so they first turned to I-Corps, and going through the I-Corps program, learned that there was demand for this by companies like Del Taco or Red Robin, these Cheesecake Factory, these big restaurant chains that have locations in lots of different jurisdictions and who want to standardize the quality of their restaurants, but are having a difficult time doing it because each jurisdiction grades them in slightly different ways and gives them slightly different scores. And so they're able to see that there was a market value in that. They applied for MII funding to continue to build out that database. They did the technology validation, and then they did the company formation when they decided to form their company. Eventually, Yelp became one of their biggest customers, and Yelp was using their database to provide these standardized health scores to restaurants across the country. And then they were acquired in 2023, and the only funding that they took were MII and I-Corps. And so none of it was dilutive. And so they were able to not have to share any of that company with anyone other than the founders. And again, I think just like a great example of a researcher very focused on their research, wanting to do more research, and identifying commercialization as a pathway to continue doing that research and provide something that was really valuable to the business community and to all of us who get to benefit from being able to look at Yelp and figure out, hey, is this a place I want to eat? I'm gonna skip through these. Dr. Lingbing Hu has actually spun off a variety of startups. He's got a great strategy where if he's got an innovation coming out of his lab that he think is commercializable, he'll identify a postdoc or a graduate student to kind of lead the company, and he'll be involved, but take a step back because as a professor, you've got lots of things going on, and kind of let the student run that. And just wanted to highlight Inventwood. They've got it's a type of wood that is reinforced and made 5 times as strong, and so it's wood, but it's stronger than steel. They have a production facility up in Frederick, and they're taking angel investment and VC investment and kind of going through that dilutive route of raising capital to be able to run manufacturing facility and produce product. Excuse me. And then our last example here, N5 Sensors is a smoke detecting system, but used at a wide scale to help do early identification of wildfires. And they've got $13 million in grants and $2 million in investments, right? And so combining that dilutive and non-dilutive funding, I believe they received an SBIR as part of their funding application process. But really, both of these things go hand in hand. You use them at different stages of the process, and they help kind of fill different gaps as you go through. So those are just a couple of the stories of individuals who have used our different funding sources available here at the University of Maryland. That's the end of my presentation today. If you've got a question, feel free to throw that into the chat. I saw that Bo Chen just had a question about the launch fund, and so I'm going to work on pulling that up. But let me drop my email in here real quick. So again, I work at Ventures. We work with the technology transfer office here, but we focus specifically on startups coming out of the University of Maryland that are based on University of Maryland technology. And so if you've got research that you're working on that you think has commercial value, if you're interested in pursuing a startup, we're happy to talk with folks and connect you with the right resources and how you go about these processes. Connect you with those site miners, connect you with the I-Core team. So please feel free to reach out. But again, I'm happy to stay here for a couple minutes and answer questions. Drop a question in the chat, raise your hand. I can have you come off mute and answer those for you while I do a little bit of research of Bo's question. But if you don't have any questions, that's the end of our presentation. And so feel free to hop off and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. So Bo, let me try and track this down for you. Let's see. All right, looks like I typed it in incorrectly there, Bo. It's usmd.edu/launch. And so that was the issue there. I've put the new website in the chat. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to close this webinar. Appreciate your engagement this afternoon, and again, hope to continue to work with you and hear from y'all.